Welcome to our second Fireside Chat. The leaves are changing and fall is in the air. What better way to celebrate National Disability Employment Awareness Month? I'm Anna Taylor, Business Relations Specialist with the Alabama Department of Rehabilitation Services. We are so excited to have Gail Smith with us here today. Hello, Gail, and welcome.
Hello, Ann, and thank you for having me.
We're looking forward to hearing your story. And so with that, Gail, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born and raised here in Alabama. I'm married. Donald and I have been married for 26 years. And I live near Jasper, but we live in the country. So I'm sort of a country girl. And I also have a guide dog named Tatum.
Well, as you know, October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, like I mentioned earlier. And these fireside chats are highlighting Alabamians with disabilities and their journey to employment. In that context, you can share with us how you acquired your disability and what experiences you had along the way. We'd love to hear all about it.
So when I was a child, I got pretty sick. And at the time, they didn't know what was wrong with me. So as it turned out, I had an infection that affected the optic nerves. And so it caused me to go totally blind. I actually went blind on my 14th birthday. And I had been pretty sick. And after that, it took me a little while to recover. And then I just continued on my education there at Gardendale High School. And after high school, I got some further education in business office training because I definitely did want to go to work. I wanted to find me a career, but back at that time was before the computers were really, there wasn't any computers back then. So it seemed to me like I really had to struggle around to find some occupation that I could do, something that would be suitable for a blind person to do. And I decided that I would like to become a typist. And so I took this business office course where I learned about business, working in offices and business related fields, different kind of occupations. And when I completed my course in that, I was trying to find a job. Well, I tell you, it was really hard to find a job. And I would just go everywhere, try to put in applications. And I think that I just struggled around with it. And I had several incidences, like back at the time. Now, remember, this was before computers. And so I heard that like the newspaper had an opening there for the classifieds to just take ads. And I thought that would be perfect because people would phone in the ads over the phone and you just type up their ads and their name and address. And actually, they just bill them through the mail because back then there wasn't credit cards and that kinds of thing accessible to take over the phone or payment. So I knew I could do that job because when I finished my course, I was actually typing 95 words a minute with no errors. But I got down to the employment at the Human Services there at the Birmingham News, and they would not even let me fill out an application because they had a particular thing I had to type, and I couldn't see to type that particular thing. And I asked the lady if she could read it to me. I could then type it. And she said no, because that would be helping me with my application. So that sort of was a bust. And then I tried to get a job with the telephone company who said blind people wasn't covered under their insurance. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because I think we all need to realize how far we've come in just these last, what to me is a few years. We have really come a long way because that kind of behavior would not be acceptable nowadays. But that's what I had to deal with to find my first job. And finally, I talked to this lady that was doing typing at home. She was working through a court reporting firm whereby the court reporters would go into court and take down the information or take down the depositions or the trial or whatever it may be. And then they would dictate that onto cassettes, and they would give her the cassettes and she would just type it up. So I thought that's something I could very well do. So I started calling all the court reporting firms anywhere around Birmingham, and I called every single one of them, and nobody would give me a chance, because if I would tell them I can't see, they would just not even give me a chance. And so I was on the very last one, and I'm like really desperate for a job. Very last one, it happened that it was a smaller firm, and I actually was speaking with the owner. And so he said, well, we'll just call you, if we need you. But I had already heard they needed some people, they needed a typist. So I told him I was just desperate. So this is what I did. I just said, I will work for you a whole month for free if you'll just give me an opportunity to work. And he said, you'll work a month for free? And I said, yes. So that's how I got my first job, because I volunteered to do it for free. Now, I'm not necessarily recommending that anyone else do that, because I was taking a chance, but I knew myself and I knew I could do that job. So he gave me one little small deposition. It was only 94 pages long. And I turned it back in, and it didn't have any errors in it. He was so impressed that he not only hired me and paid me for it, but he paid me more per sheet than other people getting paid, because he didn't have to spend time to correct it. So from there, that was my first job. I was a typist for the court reporting firms for the Jefferson County Circuit Courts. And I remained in that position, working for numerous court reporters and different firms, because as they would hear that I had good quality work, didn't need very much correcting, they was then really wanting me to work. So that was my very first job, and I sort of got it in an untraditional way, but it's all about believing in yourself, knowing like, yes, I know I can do this. And I think that's sometimes what it just comes down to. And so from there, after quite a few years, and here comes the computers. Well, at that point, they quit using typists, and they was just running their stenotape through a machine onto the computer. So at that point, I got a job, one of the companies I was working with, as a manager at a court reporting firm. So I made appointments and did office work. Well, it's sort of gone like that for many years. I've mainly worked in offices, like at construction companies, and where I would be responsible for like making sure that all of the employees had their each month they have to have a meeting for safety. So I had to make sure they had that, make sure everyone had all their time papers turned in. I actually typed up a lot of checks through a check writing program on the computer. Computers is what changed everything for people that are blind. It has opened up the world where now we can compete in jobs way more efficiently than we could, years ago prior to the computer age. So I have mainly worked in offices using Excel and Word, and that has been what I have done for a big part of my working career. Also, when the company I was working for, when they went out of business, that was when I was working for, it seemed like I would work for a company for quite a few years, and then they would go out of business or move, situations would change. And so at one time I had my own business, which was a tackle shop, like a convenience store tackle shop up close to Smith Lake. And I did that for quite a few years. That was a really enjoyable thing. I learned a lot. And from that, I proceeded on to open my own business, where now I have a Braille business, which I've had for, I'm trying to remember how long. So it's been about 12 years ago that I actually started my Braille business. But now remember, well, I don't say remember, but I actually had been doing Braille on the side for quite a long time. I enjoyed making things accessible for people that are blind. So even before I started my business, on the side, like on the weekends and at night, I was doing work for like the American Diabetes Foundation. I did some work for them. I did some work for them, some of the Mary Kate people. So I have done like Braille things for quite a few places before I actually opened my own business. So when I opened my own business, it's just been so exciting. I've got to meet so many people and so many people in the business world. You know, it's like they call me to do Braille business cards, and I'm just a real big proponent of the Braille. So I try to promote Braille in everything I do because it's very important for things to be accessible for those of us who can't read the print. So also I have the Braille business going, but also I had the opportunity to teach self-advocacy as part of the pre-employment transition program to contract with the state of Alabama Vocational Rehab to teach self-advocacy to high school students with disabilities. So I've been doing that for the last, this is the 5th school year I've been teaching self-advocacy. So I do that during the school year, during the daytime, and then I do my Braille at night and on the weekend. So I enjoy both of those. So currently I do 2 different things, and I'm just so very blessed to have the opportunity to do both of them. But you know, it's not always easy to be employed. When you're employed, it's like when you're, especially when you're, I think self-employed has a lot of challenges, but I think just being employed, period, as a person with a disability, you have a lot more things to come up to, to deal with than you would if you didn't have some kind of a disability or not. So like one thing I had to overcome, and this was a huge thing to me, was back in 2014, I broke my hand, and it was a major thing. It was just like I went blind all over again because I feel things, I read my Braille, and I kept saying, oh, it's just like I'm blind all over again. That sounds sort of funny, but if you're a blind person and you lose the use of your hand, it is really sort of traumatic, but you just can't quit. So I did lose feeling in half of my hand, but you have to just persist on and not to give up. So that's what I did. And one of the big obstacles I came in when I broke my hand was the ability to read my Braille. Like I found that to be a huge thing, especially when I'm reading in front of a group or like reading to a class or reading to a group of people. I couldn't read fast enough like I used to. And so I had to find some other way to deal with that. So when you run across an obstacle, it's like what I ended up doing was I had to put my notes on my telephone and actually listen to my notes through my hearing aids, because that's something else I didn't mention is along the way, I got hard of hearing. So I am not only totally blind, but I have a difficulty hearing. So now I read my notes when I'm in a class. I read my notes through the Bluetooth on my phone connected to my hearing aids. I'm just saying that to let people know that we have to find workarounds. So if you have a disability, a lot of times instead of just giving up and saying, well, I can't do this anymore because I can't read my notes efficiently, it's a good thing to be able to think sort of what people commonly say outside of the box and try to think of another way that you can do the same thing. And I think I've had to do that quite a bit in my life. It's just a matter of don't give up.
That's great, Gail. So I heard a story about you that was funny, and I would love for you to tell the audience about your experience shopping. So tell us that funny story, Gail.
Okay, here is me at my most embarrassing moment. I was at a department store and I was shopping by myself. So I was looking for me a handbag. And they had like all the way down the aisle handbags, low and high. And I was reaching up and unzipping and feeling inside, looking to see like how many pockets do they have? How big is this one? I was stooping down and looking at them near the floor because I was looking for just the right one. And so here I am going down the aisle, taking my time, and I was looking, unzipping, feeling inside. And I get down and I unzip this purse and I feel like it's got stuff in it. And I jerked my hand out and this lady started screaming that I was trying to rob her. And here comes the store manager and the security, and they took us back to an office. And I'll tell you, Ann, I really had a time talking my way out of that, saying, I'm blind and I was just filling up purses. I didn't know that one was attached to somebody. It was pretty embarrassing.
That's fantastic. It sounds, you got out of that one though, right?
Yes, I did. They didn't arrest me or anything. But you know, when you're blind, or probably when you have any disability, I think we just do things that are embarrassing that maybe a sighted person wouldn't do, or a person, because you would know, oh, that's connected to someone, but I didn't. And I think you just can't take that embarrassment to heart. You just have to keep on going.
Well, you're already giving us so much good advice already. And so, I would love for you to share with our viewers some additional advice on looking for an employment as an individual with a disability. So you talked a little bit earlier about, how you just kept on, you're persistent, you've overcome a tremendous amount of adversity and you prevailed. I'll never forget, now that I've interviewed you here, like, we know Gail that typed 95 words a minute, and how important it was to have both of your hands. We've learned a little bit about how, you may not have the, your vision, but you needed your hands. And so I think that's great that you're able to tell the audience about that. But tell us a little bit about some advice about looking for employment.
I think this is true for everyone, but especially a person with a disability. You need to believe in yourself, because a lot of times that's sort of what it comes down to. If you go to an employer and here you are trying to get a job, and you say, you don't hire blind people, do you? See, you don't believe in yourself. It's that attitude there. And so I think we, especially people with disabilities, they have to go in there like, I can do this. And I know I can do this. And it's like, you sort of have to sell yourself on the other person. And I know that I found out that when I deal with trying to get jobs or even talking to business people, it's like this. A lot of times I'm the first blind person they've ever talked to personally. And people have these misconceptions or ideas about disabilities, and they don't really know how to deal with it. So a lot of times it's our responsibility to sort of tell them how to deal with us. We have to believe in ourselves. We have to be very positive, upbeat. You have to be confident, very confident. No, like, yes, I can do this. When you interview for a job, it's very important that you're very confident and that you believe in yourself and that it shows. And if the person you're talking to seems uncomfortable about your disability, bring it up. Just talk to them about it. That's what I do. A lot of times I can tell people are uncomfortable, maybe like talking to me because I'm blind. So I'll just say, okay, let's talk about my blindness a little bit. And do you have any questions? And what would you like to know? Because I'm open about it. And I think a lot of times it's up to us to sort of be the icebreaker when we're interviewing for jobs with the person that's going to be our employee or our employer, because maybe we're the first person they've ever dealt with. See, and maybe they're just uncertain. They're probably uneasy with us. So instead of them having to deal with us, I think sometimes employers will just say, we'll call you, and just slough you off rather than actually trying to deal with it. So that's advice that I found out in my life, is when I approach someone about employment, which I'm self-employed now. So, but this is the thing, I still have to approach people in businesses, asking them to let me braille their supplies. So I'm still, even though I'm self-employed, I'm still have to approach people and ask for work, tell them my services are available and why, maybe what I could do for them that I think I can do better than other people. I think a lot of times that it's important how we project ourselves as being where they won't see the disability, but they'll see us and our ability to do the work.
Wow, that is so powerful, Gail. Like there are so many myths, and you've dispelled a lot of those right there. And I just really am grateful for you talking to our audience. And one of the takeaways that I know I got is, you just make it comfortable. You let them talk to you about their questions. And so is that just Gail's personality, or did someone share that with you? Or, was that one of the things you learned along your journey? Tell us a little bit more about that, like getting comfortable just talking about disability.
Well, no. And sadly to say, when I went blind, I didn't know any other blind people, and I never did have the opportunity to go to the school for the blind. So I was just sort of on my own, and I've really made a lot of bad decisions, and it's sort of like been trial and error. So this is what I've just learned in the end. And it's like, I've read a lot. I read a lot. I love to read. That's one of my very favorite pastimes. And so I read about these people that are successful, like, okay, so what is the difference? What is the difference? How come some people can be so successful and then some of us seem like we just struggle along? And it has to do, I think, with their attitude. Like, you see these people, and I've worked hard to try to make myself a little bit like this over the years, where it's like people just like, I know it and I know I can do it. It's not being egotistical, but still it's that having pride in yourself and feeling confident with yourself and knowing what you can do. I think you have to project that if you really are interested in getting a job or being employed somewhere. And so I've tried to work on that. Used to, I was really quiet. And I wouldn't say very much when I'd be around other people. And I would have never, ever, ever spoke in front of a group of people because I was just so shy. But that's not the way to get him. If you want a job, that is not the way to get employed. You have to sort of be out there. You have to be willing to speak up for yourself. Say you get this job and you're on the job and you run into what I call a bump in the road, which life is full of those, and we have to learn to maneuver over them and not just stop. We have to find a way to go over or around the bumps in our lives, because we don't want to just stop. So I found also that it's very important when you do get a job is to advocate for yourself. If you're on the job and you don't know what to do, if you just stop, your boss is going to think this person is lazy, when that's probably not the case at all. Maybe you just don't know what to do. So at that point, it's really good to speak up for yourself. If you don't know what to do, you're just not sure, you need to actually speak up and tell them what you need. If they asked you to do something you can't do, explain to your boss why that isn't possible with your disability. I can't do that this particular way. Now, if you would let me move it over here, or if you'd make this more accessible to me, or if you wouldn't, make these changes, then I could do that just fine. But you have to tell them. I think often when we're employed, we forget that our boss can't read our minds. So if we find something difficult, hard to do, it's our responsibility to speak up about that. And that's one reason that I have taken, I've learned about advocating for ourselves, because a lot of times when you're on the job, you don't have anyone else to advocate for you. You just are there for yourself. Now, I have been very, very blessed, because when I got my very first job, not my very first job, when I got my very first job with the computer, I could not have done that job if I did not have a rehab counselor that bought me the speech program to go in that computer, because I was all excited about getting my first job with a computer, but I didn't, so I had to tell my boss, like, okay, she had already hired me, and I didn't realize it was going to be on the computer because I never had used a computer. So I had to just say, look, I can do this job, but I need some training on the computer. I don't know how to use it, and I don't have a speech program, and this and that. And I had to just be upfront and tell them, like, look, I'm really excited about this job, but I can't do it until I get the appropriate equipment. And so I contacted rehab, who came out, did evaluation to see what I needed, talked to my boss about it. My boss actually purchased the computer and all, and rehab made it possible by purchasing Braille Embosser and the programs for that, and also the speech program to go in the computer. So I think that it's a matter of speaking up for yourself. Whatever you need to say that and advocate for yourself. I've done it. I've just learned to advocate for myself over the years. I've learned to advocate for myself and to believe in myself, and to try to not give up too easily. A lot of times we just give up too soon.
Wow. And Gail, you are such an inspiration with those great words of advice, not just for people with disabilities, but for anybody. Overcoming adversity, not giving up, advocating for yourself. I mean, you have certainly modeled the way to find employment and to be happy in employment too. You got to just ask for what you need, and it's okay. And thank you for making that normal to do. It's hard. And so thank you for helping us understand how to do that and being a great advocate. If you've got any parting words, it sounds like you've given us some great stuff, and we've certainly gotten a lot out of this today. You have any final thoughts?
Well, I think one more thing I would like to say, and that is, don't let fear rule your path of life, because a lot of times we might get an opportunity to do something, but we're afraid. The unknown is really scary. I think the unknown of doing something or working someplace, like, I don't know anybody there. I don't know how to do, I don't know what they're going to expect of me. And we think, what if this? What if that? And we all come up with all these reasons. We're real apprehensive. And I have actually seen people that wouldn't accept a job because they let their fear get the best of them. And it's quite okay to be afraid, because I've been afraid plenty of times. I travel, I'm just saying, me personally, I traveled places by myself. Like, I went up to Washington, D.C. and spoke to senators, and I went by myself, and it's sort of scary, but at the same time, it's okay to be afraid, but don't give in to those fears. The successful people that I've always read about are successful because they just didn't give in to that. It's not that they're not afraid to do things. It's not that they're afraid to go and try different things, but they just don't let that rule them, like, to be controlled, like, where am I going to work? And I'm afraid to go over here. And what if this happens? And what if they don't like a person with a disability? And what if, we all come up with those. I do. I get real when I'm doing something I've never done before. It is sort of scary, but I'm sort of afraid, but I just do it anyway. Because once you do it, it builds that confidence in you, and then you believe in yourself even more. Like, yeah, I just did that. So if you don't do it, you'll end up just sitting at home and being afraid. So I'm just saying, try not to let your fear of the unknown rule whether you work or what kind of work you do or where you work or how you work or how am I going to get there? You know, we all come up with a zillion what ifs. And I think a lot of times that just the fear of the unknown holds us back from trying a job or from trying something different.
Wow, you have certainly encouraged my heart today, Gail. Thank you so much for this really, really great conversation and for being with us here today, this fireside chat. I know that we'll be watching this again, and I just think that the words that you gave us, the stories that you told us, certainly will resonate with a lot of people. And we are just really grateful to have had you give us your time today, give us your feedback and advice. And okay, so we've got a couple of questions. Everybody, let's just take a second and drop a heart emoji for Gail, y'all, because was that not an amazing story? Gail, your journey, even with the water bottle and all that and the fan, you know what? You're real, Gail, and that's what we are here for today. We want to hear people that are real and, you know, down to earth folks. And who better to let us know about the disability journey than somebody that's just telling it like it is. And I mean, I just am grateful for you. So how about we go to the first question? Let's see what we got here. Our first question today. How long did it take you, Gail, to type up your first deposition?
Oh, it was 95 pages, and I was trying to be so particular with it, you know, so it took me about 2 days.
Okay, good.
I remember that first one, and I kept sort of stressing over it. I even hired somebody to proofread it for me.
That's great. Okay, well, super. So with that, the next question is, what kind of equipment is needed to be successful in a position? So you mentioned, you know, advocating for equipment that you need and all of that. So we have a question from one of our employers that, you know, help us understand a little bit about what type of equipment someone that that's not able to see might use in the workplace.
Okay, so I know a computer is very important to me, and on the computer, I have the speech program, which is absolutely necessary if a blind person is going to use a computer. If a person has low vision, they might need a program to enlarge the print, but in my case, I use a speech program. Also, it's according to what they need to do in their job. Like my first job and a lot of the jobs I've had since then, I have to like take notes or take down information that I need to be able to read back. So I have a program on the computer called Duxbury that I type into, and I can braille it out. Also a braille embosser that you can braille out, you know, work with. So, and I think a lot is going to be according to what the disability is.
Okay, did you say Duxbury?
Yes, Duxbury, it's a Braille program, and you type print into it, and then it will convert it into the Braille.
Wow, isn't that fantastic? So to piggyback on the equipment question, is there a special kind of equipment that you would recommend to make computers and printers more accessible for people with limited vision or blindness?
I think a lot has to do with what kind of training they had on the computers, because I do know some blind people that use Mac computers really well, but now I've been trained and use a Windows. So I think that is according to the individual. And say if they were a low vision individual, maybe they would need a keyboard that has got the real contrast on the letters. And some people might need larger keys, but I just use a regular keyboard and a regular computer with the speech.
Okay.
And I'm going to go back to the Duxbury program for a moment, because in Duxbury, I can actually type Braille into it by it has where you can set it to do the 6-dot typing. So I actually type Braille right into it most of the time when I'm taking notes and things. In Duxbury, I just type on my computer keyboard, but I only use 6 keys because Braille has 6 dots. And so it's just, I don't know, if a person's blind and if they read Braille, I think it's important to have Duxbury and a Braille embosser.
Okay, that's great. We love learning about this, Gail. Thank you, because a lot of people don't know the technology that's out there, or how someone that's blind, is able to do the stuff that you're doing. So
now, the other thing is the printer. I was going to just say printers nowadays are, a lot of them are not really very accessible because they have the flat screen and you like touch an icon to copy or something. So when I buy a printer, I try to find one that's got the old-timey like buttons that I have to press, and then I put Braille labels on them just so that I'll remember which button is for what. And if there's not a room to put actually put the Braille on the machine, on the button, I might put it above it or beside it. And I have just drawn out a little layout, with the Braille on a sheet that I just keep laying there by the printer. I think printers nowadays, a lot of times, are not really accessible.
okay. So we have a question, the next question, and we've got several. What is the most common misperception that you have found people to have that you would like others to know about? Great question, Lisa.
Yes, I think that I think a lot of people have really low expectations for people with disabilities. And that's not only blind people, but people with all disabilities. And I wish we could somehow get people to understand that people with disabilities are just as capable if they have the right equipment a lot of times. And I think we should get rid of that really low I can't even pronounce that, low expectations of people with disabilities. Like when you see a person with disability, a lot of times you might just automatically assume like, oh, they can't do this or they can't do that.
Okay, that's great advice. So the next question is from Stephanie. When you started your business, how many negative responses did you get?
Really none. I don't, if I did, I don't remember them, because I had been doing Braille since 1990 on the side when I got my very first Braille embosser, and I was using DOS back then. And I was doing Braille for people. So it just sort of grew over a lot of years. And when I went into business, actually, the people that I was telling was really glad that I was going into it full time. But, you always in general have people that'll state like, well, the one thing I did have some negative feedback from was when I said, I'm going to design my own website, because to begin with, I had a beautiful website. It wasn't very accessible to people that were using screen readers. So I decided to just sort of do it on my own. And I'm saying it can use some improvement even now, but I have built my website myself. And in the beginning, I had people saying, you can't do that. That's, you have to be sighted to build a website. And so I did receive a good bit of negative feedback from that to begin with.
Wow, that's good. Building a website and not being able to see, that's a pretty big hurdle to overcome, and to show people that with the right tools, and the accessible tools, you can do whatever you want to. Someone made a comment, Miss Annette, she said that she just wanted to share that at a previous company, an awesome job for the blind community was putting boxes together for shipments and product movement. She had a wonderful employee about 20 years ago that was extremely fast and accurate. So thanks for that shout out for that blind community there, Annette. Another question I wanted to ask Gail was, you mentioned going to Washington, and that was scary for you at first. So tell us about your journey as far as what it was like navigating, flying there or driving there, however you went, and some of the things as you are out and about that you can maybe share with employers to make the world a little bit better, more accessible. If you have any tips about that, we'd love to hear your feedback.
I have traveled a good bit, different places by myself. Now, my husband will drive me to the airport, but he does not like to go through security. So he just sort of lets me out at the sidewalk because he just like, oh, do I have to? I was like, no, you don't have to. But I usually try to make sure, like at the airport, I always employee because I think that is just for safety purposes. We need to make sure that we are talking to the right people. You can't just go in an airport. I don't ever just like to ask just anybody, for help, but I have occasionally just said, excuse me, could you direct me to this corridor or that one? So I think it's just a matter of different situations work out different. But when you're navigating by yourself, you have to know where you're going. So when you get into like an airport type situation, when I disembark from a plane and have a connecting flight, I always ask the airport employee like which direction to go. And see now, this is a really great advantage now is that I have signed up for IRA, which is a visual interpreter for the blind. So I just tap on that app on my phone and I can talk to a real live person and they can help me find the signs to say which way to go or where I need to be or what time my flight's leaving or whatever I need. So I can actually do that if I need to now, which all these years we've not had that ability. But now I do utilize that sometimes in airports to help find my way around.
Well, tell us a little bit more about that. Do you turn on your phone and show that around? A lot of people are curious about that, Gail. So, how do you use that app? That's so amazing that came out, and that's a really new technology. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, IRA, they have trained agents, and so you call in and they look through the camera of your phone. And so I could say like, I'm looking for a place to get a Dr. Pepper. That's what I always get. Like I'm looking for a place to get a Dr. Pepper. I'm showing that around and I say, okay, down about 20 feet on your right, there's a little place. So I can walk them down there. And when I get there, I can actually go in and they will help me, if I want them to, they will help me look through the coolers and find my Dr. Pepper. And I can actually go and purchase it and go on my way. It's just sort of like being with a sighted person. But if you need them, they're there. If you don't, they're not. And so it's a program they have. Let me see. They have a free program. I think you just get like 5 minutes a day. And from that, you pay for like how much you would like a month. But when you call, the first 5 minutes of every call is free for people that are paid. So I find that I really don't use very many minutes. I looked yesterday, I've only used 8 minutes. So I don't use them very often, but when I need them, it's just like a lifesaver. I was at a big convention down in Orlando at the National Federation of the Blind convention a couple of years ago. And it was my first, well, maybe it's about 3-4 years ago. And it was my very first time to use IRA. And so I had just signed up for it in the exhibit hall. And so later that day, I was walking and my dog needed to go outside. So I just went out a door of that big complex that I never had been out before. And I was looking for some place for her to relieve. And so I couldn't find any place. Like, I'm just going to call IRA and I'm just going to ask them. And so the lady came on the phone and said, could she help me? And I said, yes, I'm looking for some grass. And she was like, do what? I said, to relieve my dog. So that was sort of funny.
That's great, Gail. All right, y'all. Do you have any more questions for Gail today? Drop them in the chat. Okay.
I'll go ahead while some people are entering, if that's okay, Anna. Can you hear me?
Please. Yes.
So, Gail, as a small business owner, I know that there are a lot of individuals with disabilities who have thought about or are interested in starting their own small business. Do you have any advice or do's or don'ts to share with individuals who may be interested?
Yes, it's sort of the same thing that I did before I started my business. To draw up a business plan, do a lot of research to see who would be interested in your product, do research on how can you let people know it's available. You know, if you've got a great plan and there's no way to let people know it's available, so you have to take a lot of that into consideration. And I think it's really good to spend that time before you invest anything or, you know, really get into it, to do your business plan and think about who could use my product? How am I going to market it? How am I going to keep my books? You know, what program am I going to use to keep my books? So what program is accessible? And how am I going to accept my payments? And how am I going to send receipts? Am I going to be able to send people receipts? And what about if I have to ship something out? Do I have that worked out? Am I lined up with a company to print shipping labels and that kind of thing? There's a whole lot of things you really need to go through and figure out when you're going to start your own business. And then one of the things that I even did is had a contingent plan. Like, okay, so what if I'm in business, and what if something catastrophic happens to me and I'm unable to work or produce for a short period of time? What am I going to do about that? And that really came in handy back in 2014 when I broke my hand. And is I just went to my contingency plan. I had planned that for other people to be able to do my Braille, someone that was certified, and I had, I talked to them some about it. And anyway, so I'm just saying, whatever it is, you need to think about a contingency plan. Like, what if I can't work, or what if I'm unable to do? Is my whole business just going to collapse because I'm like unavailable for a month? And I think there's a lot of the things is like regular businesses, not just people with disabilities. But if you have a disability, I think it's a little more intense sometimes to try to come up with ways that you're going to handle everything, and how you're going to handle your banking, how you're going to keep up if you have payroll, who's going to do your taxes. It's quite a few things. Actually, I looked online before I started my businesses. I've looked online both times, and I see business plan, how to be self-employed and draw up your own business plan. And I think that planning in the very beginning, it really makes an impact if your business is successful or not.
That's really good. Really good. Wow, that is such great advice for all of our entrepreneurs out there, Gail. We are really glad to have that information. That's good. Step by step, making sure you have a contingency plan, all of those types of things. You are such a good model for that. All right, so we are coming up on almost an hour. Do we have one last question for Gail? Okay. All right. Well, very good, y'all. Thank you, Gail. You have been great today. We have really, really enjoyed our second fireside chat with you. All of the information you gave us today was so great. So we will be sending this recording out. This will be on our ADRS education channel, so you guys can check that out as soon as we get that loaded up. So thank you, guys. Appreciate you, Gail, and have a great day. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us today.